You're listening to Eat, Play, Sex with Dr. Cat, the place to up-level that sexy life of yours, with expert talk on sex, love, and nutrition.
Where did this even come from? I'm like,
right. Well,
what?
It's for some reason, and maybe you understand this, better than I do. I still don't understand why people mess with genitals so much.
Mm-hmm.
But circumcision is an old surgery that has both religious and tribal origins. So in Jews and Muslims, have been circumcising. In the Arab world, circumcision is very, very common, as is female genital cutting. And then in tribal societies, circumcision has also been practiced usually as an initiation ritual in older children. Teenagers, say, people going through puberty, or even young boys, but not infants. But Maimonides, talks about Jewish circumcision in 1200, the year 1200, and he says that circumcision is serves the purpose of dulling the sexual pleasure of men and women. And that's a good thing, because then men can study more and focus on the important things and not on enjoyment, not on sexual pleasure. So early on, Jewish tradition recognized circumcision as diminishing sexual pleasure. And then in the 1800s, the origin of circumcision as part of American culture started in the Victorian era in English-speaking countries, England, United States, Australia. Pretty much disappeared in the UK and Australia, but persisted in the United States. Yeah. And that was because masturbation was seen as being awful, like as being harmful and
sin. Yeah.
Sin, yeah.
Don't
Right.
touch yourself.
Don't touch yourself. So how can we keep these nasty boys from touching themselves? Well, how about we inflict pain on their genitals? Yeah. And then they won't touch themselves. Well, it didn't work, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
clearly.
And actually, the first paper I ever wrote about circumcision, when I was in law school, I found some study, who knows whether it's, I don't care really. It was almost comical that American circumcised men masturbate 1.4 times more than intact men. I don't know how big the study was or whatever, but we know it didn't work. We know that circumcised men masturbate plenty. Everybody should be masturbating and enjoying it. But that was the origin. And then it got kind of embedded in American medical culture as part of the rationale for it kind of changed over time, So now people are doctors and people who defend circumcision are desperate to say how it makes no difference in sexual pleasure. Well, of course it makes a difference. Yeah. How can you remove a body part? Forget the fact that you've inflicted pain. There's somewhere in the psyche of the baby is embedded this painful early experience. But how can you remove a body part with all these nerves and say you're not missing anything? You're missing, at a minimum, that body part and all the nerves. Of course you're missing something. Now, that doesn't mean you can't enjoy sex, doesn't mean you can't have pleasure, but you have definitely, by removing the foreskin of a male, you have diminished that person's sexual pleasure and their potential for full sexual pleasure. That's just the truth. It doesn't mean, again, that you can't find ways to make up for it, have pleasure, have intimacy, but that is missing. So as I was, sorry for going on and on, but I guess that's why I'm here, right?
No, this is, I love this right now. And, to focus on that for a moment, because I'm thinking like, well, how does that change the pleasure of, does it change the pleasure of the woman, or is this like, does it make it easier for, I don't know, reducing friction? Like, I'm just thinking of like the anatomical, because I'm also thinking of my last experiences with the men, that have both been using the word intact and not. Yeah. And so having those experiences with myself of, yeah, there's a lot more skin to play with, but it's also easier for like moving in and out. Just a
Right.
lot more sliding.
Right. Sliding
Able.
and gliding, right? Let me go
Yeah.
back for just 1 second to complete
Mhm.
a thought
Sure, sure,
about
sure.
how it became embedded in American culture. So even after people stopped thinking that circumcision was that masturbation was the worst sin, what happened was circumcision became part of the specialty of obstetrics. Obstetrics before really the early part of the century, really 1910, 1920, midwives delivered all the babies. They were delivered at home.
Mhm.
When obstetrics evolved as a specialty, we know what it did to childbirth. We know it meant women were going to get drugged and hooded, and forceps were going to pull their babies out, and they were going to not be able to participate in the birth experience. And the obstetrician, who was a surgeon, the obstetrician started circumcising the babies. Sometimes, I mean, almost immediately upon birth. There's even a story, which in the medical literature, of a doctor who would circumcise a baby before he was out of the birth canal.
Mm.
It became just, I know, part of American medicine, and then
Yeah.
and also British, Anglophone medicine. But then in the Second World War, um, the British developed the National Health Service, and they went very systematically through medical procedures and needs, and they decided that because circumcision served no medical or therapeutic purpose, they wouldn't pay for it. So it basically just died out in Britain, died out a little later in Australia. Canada's a mix, and the US is the only country in the world where infant circumcision is carried out as a medical, I say it's a medical ritual, as a medical
Mm.
practice routinely.
Lovers, thank you again for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, hit subscribe and head over to eatplaysex.com to connect with me and grab my sexy guides. Because my goal here is to get you to eat, play, and sex better so you can improve your sex life, which will improve every aspect of your life. Until next time, keep it sexy.